session?
Good.
Okay. It's almost 7 p.m. So we are about to start our panel. We also will be recording our panel to make it available material later on. We'll use it online as the conference follow-up and for other activities as well. I've got a message from my technical team that just a minute to slow down because we have to start the streaming.
Yeah, we need some time to start the
So just one minute.
social media. No, I feel bad. I interrupted you, Piotr. I'm sorry.
No problem.
Okay, I got a message that it's okay, so we can go on. So welcome at the panel discussion that is a part of AI at Enterprise Summit, the conference, international conference organized by Evention at CODET. We have already yesterday US session, tomorrow day full of presentations, roundtable discussions, tech battle. So really tough day full of AI, from very technical stuff to business applications and business context, and also managing AI people as a teams, and a lot of interesting stuff. And this presentations will be also available to the participants after the conference on a conference system that will be available for the next weeks to watch that, but you didn't have a chance to watch. And panel is slightly different from the subject we have covered during the conference because it's about the support for AI, support mostly done by government or similar entities. And I have a pleasure to introduce the guests in the panel that are Piotr Mieczkowski, who is Managing Director of Digital Poland. It's NGOs in Poland dealing with high tech, doing a lot of interesting research, reports, a lot of very, very good job for the whole community of people dealing with AI and other important factors of technology that is important for the development of the society and business in Poland. We also have got Professor Grzegorz Nalepa from Jagiellonian University when he's chairing the human-centered AI laboratory. Also, Professor Nalepa is involved in startups area in business side of AI. We have Yoel Rosenberg from Israel, who is Director and Technological and Strategy Division of Israeli Innovation Authority. Welcome, Yoel. And we have the Wolfgang Feist has just arrived, so I will promote him to the panelist. We also have Dr. Wolfgang Feist, co-founder and CEO of ValueWorks from Germany. So the idea is that it's in an international environment, and we can talk more broadly about the subject. But let me start with the Polish guests in the panel. My first question is, because, well, there are a lot of happening in technology area, a lot of interesting things, ideas, a lot of areas we can automate, make more innovative, that people are working on, programmers, developers, and really clever guys. Why we are so much excited about AI, and why AI should be supported by the government or public funds or whatever. Why don't leave it just to the natural market forces, and don't put public interest here? But definitely the world is quite opposite. So we can see big funding, big interest from the governments in United States, in China, and also in Europe, and in other countries. So why everybody is rushing to support AI? Why it's like that? It's because we want to catch up the biggest powers here, and we just have to? Is it because we want to be the leaders here, because AI is well, something that will be very important in the future, as something that really makes countries powerful, and maybe we do it because we know that we are sure that it's just good for the society, so for social good. Piotr, what do you think about that? Because you are, well, part of this involvement.
Well, I would say that every country has a different motive. I mean, there are some countries like Japan who see technologies as part of an answer to a problem. For example, aging society. So they are not open for immigration, and for many years they support robotics in order to automate the work, but also to support aging society. So, for example, if you have a problem with lack of drivers, that there is no one to bring you the parcel coming from e-commerce, then you want to present the autonomous vehicle, like a DHL, UPS, who will bring you as a robot, or drone who will deliver you a parcel to the door. So I think that's one motive. So for society, I would say, and the robotics, the AI, it was happening for many years, and you will know probably very well, much better than me, that there are many winters, summers in the AI, and now I think it's a new phase. So but there are many different aspects of whys, I would say, and again, if we look at the Europe, then there was a problem that Europe is not digital. That's why they want to build a single market, etc. They want to catch up with the US and China as the biggest players. But it's a typical thing in Europe. We want to regulate something, so we want to make the AI trustworthy. There are discrimination, etc., etc. So there are many flavors of that. From people point of view, like diversity, we want to bring women, or we want to make scoring, which take into consideration the color of the skin, etc. Because we have many values, and I think that show up in many other previous sectors. Like, there are the regulation like GDPR, which try to regulate privacy, for example. I will not discuss what's the end result, because that's a different story, but nevertheless, they want to try to regulate. And there is a US driven by companies, and I remember like the automated vehicles, AD, started over there run by DARPA at the desert. They were making contests at Arizona deserts, just to improve the military capabilities, or the capabilities of the several, I would say, military corporations, and to speed up the development of the enterprise, increase the productivity. So there are many flavors of why we do support AI all around the world. In terms of why government, I believe, again, that government could speed up the development of AI or try to regulate, the use of the technology. But I would say that you have to put money on the table. And China, as we know, US, just this week we heard, I think, like 200 billion US dollars will be put on the table again, and 50 billion of that will be used for semiconductors industry, but again many billions will be used for AI. In Poland, unfortunately, I think in the CE countries in general, the money is not so big. So we have, for example, we created. I was one of the author. We created, for example, grants for the small startups, and I believe that at least in CE countries or even in emerging economies, we need government support to support the startups, because the corporation, the whole ecosystem is not so active. So I think you could use the funds to speed up the development of the solutions and help very small companies, because if you look at the state of AI, we see that half of the market is like startups who have like 3 people. So they are missing demand, because the corporations which are in Poland, half of them are state-owned, are not so innovative. And AI in Poland, at least at the moment, is still treated as an innovation. So there's no demand. That's why the demand is coming from abroad of Poland, I would say, from Germany, from France, US, I mean, the main markets, I would say. And that's why I think in Poland, at least, we need some government support, some funding for startups, and to support the, I would say, just to put the final words, I would say to support the startup and build the demand, which because I believe there is a supply of technology, of the specialists, expert, but there is lack of, I would say, not enough demand coming from the market, at least in Poland. I'm talking about the Poland here. Yep. So I think there are different reasons why there is a policy.
Okay, but there are a couple of startups in Poland dealing with AI technology, but well, most of them concentrate on foreign markets, foreign customers. So it really didn't affect that what's happening inside Poland in terms of implementation and using AI. So is there any idea how to?
Yeah, I don't want to speak for the whole panel because there are so many good guests. So let me just put it in a very simple way. When we were creating the program, we created several scenarios of using AI. For example, we stated, we discovered that, for example, we need to speed up the development of AI in healthcare, and we want to shorten the queues when you're waiting for the doctor. So we want to help the doctor, and we are looking for an assistant, and we're looking for some kind of, let's say, voice AI bot who will listen to the doctor, and he will not spend time, putting with those 2 fingers prescription to your computer, just waiting like 10 minutes. And you don't know the result, by the way. Then you go out of the room and okay, I'm ill. I need to take the pills. So we want to cut this 10 minutes period when you're waiting and the doctor is filling up the form. And that's why for example, one of the scenarios is that we want to support voice assistant in Polish, because the players who are like you said, AI companies, AI startups who are active in the foreign market, they of course are using English, maybe the other most popular languages like Spanish, but there were not so many, I would say, demand coming from the Polish market. So the startups didn't develop the very good, I would say, they didn't have enough time or resources to develop a very good voice AI assistant, which is fluent, I would say, in Polish, for example. So that was a particular answer for Polish market, voice assistant. The other was, for example, agriculture robots, but not agriculture robot, but apple, which collect apples. Why? Because apple is one of the fruit which is very common in Poland, for example. So the cases which we prepare are dedicated for the Polish market. So they will not cover any, the whole world, just several aspects which are not, where is not enough demand, I would say, coming from the state-owned companies or private sector.
Okay. Today at the conference, we got at least 2 presentations which were about the agriculture applications. So that's a pretty huge potential, and a lot of great ideas in AI came up here. That's even some of them are happening in Poland. So there are still some interesting areas to discover, which maybe not that well known on a public market. So, well, I have a question for Professor Nalepa. How you see this necessity for government support? Of course, in a research academia sector, it's obvious because it's just something that creates the value for the society, and so invest in research in scientific part. But what do you think about this support in other areas which are strictly business oriented?
Yes, I agree that in practice in different countries, the state has completely different goals and different interests in supporting AI. And I think basically the state should be an active actor in cases where there are certain technologies that has huge societal or economical impact. And clearly AI is a kind of horizontal technology that touches many areas. And this is why I believe that it's one of the main reasons why now most of the governments are in some way interested in supporting AI. Speaking about research and the relationship between research and business. So, AI is quite distinct, in my opinion, from some other technologies that we were facing before, because AI is still very much research oriented, in my opinion. I mean, I fully agree that we have a number of mature AI technologies, but on the other hand, AI is still very much driven by research. And we should keep in mind that in many countries, definitely in Europe, research is often funded from public sources. So this is why it is in a way responsibility of the state to make some decisions how the state spends this money and how it creates certain bridges between the academic community and the business, because in some of the countries that were already mentioned, there are completely different cultures of positioning the universities and positioning the academia towards business, towards the economy. And in my opinion, in Poland, in some cases we are quite disconnected. This is a kind of heritage that we are trying to get rid of. But I think this is why this is the responsibility and the role of the government to try to create certain ecosystems between the academia, the universities, and the companies. Also, a number of organizations that try to cooperate with companies. So this can be done using some dedicated projects, as Piotr mentioned. Another thing that we have been missing, in my opinion, in Poland, are dedicated research labs, which are somewhere in between the academia and the industry, the actual industry. So research labs that try to cooperate with business partners, and research labs that are not really oriented on education, because actually one of the important discussions that we've been having in some last years regarding some governmental meetings where Piotr was also present is if we position research more closer to higher education or actually the economy in the industry. And this is that there are different approaches in different countries, and it has changed. It has been changing in Poland also for some time. Okay, but actually our tradition is that we put, even if you look at the ministries, the Ministry of Science has been, I think for the most of the time in the last decades, basically connected to education. Right now, it's not even anymore higher education; it's just education and science, right? And in some other countries, and probably some of our guests can comment on this, the positioning of research and is slightly different, not just in education. It's much more horizontal. So I think this is one of the questions that we should answer in Poland, how we want to see it, because I think one of the consequences of this positioning is that people working in the universities, at the end of the day, they're mostly interested in teaching, or maybe if they are still interested in working in companies, because we know of number of people who would love to work on applied projects. They are mostly evaluated based on on the teaching activities, which is, in my personal opinion, not that effective. Okay, so these are just some of the examples. So basically, the creation of different ecosystems for cooperation of academia and the business partners and the industrial partners, and this is clearly the role of the government. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is very important observation that dealing with the support for AI and how it's done in a particular country, it could not be treated separate. It sometimes has really deep roots in how the whole system works. And I mean, academia, business, and government involvement, and it tightly coupled. So it's not easy to change it just for AI, right? Okay, so I have a question for Yael Rosenberger from Israel. You are, of course, the country known for startups, as a machine for producing innovation. That really, Israel is not a big country, so you have to find customers worldwide to make this scale effect. What really helps to create great things. What are your experiences with the support or involvement of government or public institutions in developing AI, making Israel one of the major providers of AI products or solutions? Can you share with us?
Yes, I will share, and if it's okay, I will share just 2 slides I prepared.
Yeah, sure.
And I think it will also help to share with you. First of all, I want to say good evening and thank you for having me here with you tonight. So Israel is I think in a very good place in looking into AI and what we have in Israel, and I think that this discussion is very interesting to see what we have in common and things we want or we think that as government we need to put our effort into, but also things that are unique for each country with their specific challenges. So here I'm sharing with you a slide that is taken from the web. You can also see it. It's from a site called tortoisemedia.com, and actually ranks 62 countries with different AI measures. So we can see that Israel, I think, is in a pretty good place, ranked here number 6 from all those 62 countries mentioned. And we can see here the different criteria. So we can see what Israel does good and what Israel actually needs to improve in. And these categories, these numbers are actually, the lower the number is, the better. So where is Israel good at? So we can see that Israel is good in talent, meaning we have people that are capable to invest their time in R&D and AI. Infrastructure and operating environment, we need to improve. These are not good numbers. These are things we need to do better. So operating environment is actually the regulation that was discussed a little bit here before. R&D are places that Israel are good at. Government strategy, we really need to improve. This is really bad. This means that Israel, up to a couple of months ago, didn't have any strategy available on AI. And we are a bit behind because there are countries that have the strategy up on the table for probably 3, 4, 5 years already operating and have fundings and everything. And commercial, we are actually doing very good. This means that we have a lot of startups, a lot of investments into AI. So I think that the interesting thing, or not interesting or not coincidence at all, is that this, that doesn't come from any Israeli site, aligns exactly to the findings that the committee that put the strategy on the table, which is not yet accepted and not yet funded. That's why it's still here listed as very low ring here as 51, but the findings are very, very similar. So I want to share with you what are the good things and what we think that the government needs to do. So first of all, the government needs to try and not do bad things. So at least not make bad disruption to the ecosystem. So where the ecosystem is good, the government doesn't need to do doesn't need to do much. So I think that different to the situation that was mentioned in Poland, the Israeli government doesn't need to do anything specific to encourage new AI startups or new AI companies to grow, because that happens by itself. So Israel is traditionally very good in software development. Cybersecurity was very strong, or still is a very strong sector here in Israel. And AI, when we're not talking about infrastructure, and we'll talk about that in a second, so just having companies that need to focus on R&D, software R&D, that's places that we are very good in. Something that I can relate to what was mentioned before regarding the connection between the academia and the industry, and you can see that was prepared on the slide, not only relating to what was said here. We can see that out of the 1,200 companies that could be found here in Israel under the AI topic, only 32 companies were based on IP transfer from the academia, meaning there is a lot of research done in the academia in these fields, but the knowledge transfer from the academia to the industry is not as good as expected. Another challenge is that it is known, I'm sure I don't need to elaborate on that data is basics for AI. So big databases are a must and needed for development. And Israel is still behind so there are a lot of national databases, and Israel is also known for having digital medical records for probably 20 years. So it's a big national database and government databases, but those databases are still not available for the public. This is also something that needs to be done and will hopefully enable more research and development to be done. Another thing that we are focusing on is enabling all the computing that needs to be available for that. So is for computing in scale, not just regular computing. So high performance computing, Israel doesn't have any HPC that ranks in the top 500 list of HPCs in the world in Israel, and never had. So Israel never put enough funding to put together an available HPC for the public. Researchers still need to use infrastructure abroad for that. Another thing is obviously, and of course, I think this is common for the entire world, is that we're missing human capital. So we don't have enough researchers in the academia, and then we don't have enough, the demand in the market for people is higher than what is there. So not having enough in the academia and people from the academia moving to the industry leaves the academia not in a good place. So this also, so I'm sharing all this, and having said all that, those are the main focuses we think in Israel that the government needs to put the focus on. Human capital was the last thing I mentioned. Infrastructure is the other thing, and an enabling environment regulation. So those are the things that we as government think that our focus and funding needs to go there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you observe that the evolution of the approach of how it's supported or promoted by Israel in the AI sector? Is it changing throughout the years?
Is it changing? So I think that now the market in Israel is, we say it's very hot. There is a lot of private money in Israel going to funding the companies and buying companies and investing in companies and creating companies. So so the government is more looking into the other topics I just discussed. So companies are good, happening, growing. The ecosystem is very alive, and I think that that's the major change comparing to 2018 maybe, that there was less private money and the government invested much more in R&D inside the companies by funding their R&D programs. So now we are less in funding R&D programs and more in funding infrastructure and human capital for the future, for the next growth.
Okay, well, by investing in human capital, you mean education at universities or other forms of
yeah, so education in universities, definitely they are always happy to get more funds. That's one part. Other part is other available programs for these specific subjects or work availabilities that are available in Israel. For example, data scientists and AI researchers. So not under academia, but under private education or private courses that are available to transfer people from other works that they do to focus on that. And I think something interesting that happened in Israel in cybersecurity and will probably happen in AI also is cybersecurity was a very high trend in Israel for probably the last maybe 7-10 years. And education started already in high school. So they can do their finals in high school on cybersecurity. So like they can do physics, math, English, and history. Others, they can also choose cybersecurity as their finals. And probably Israel will put AI programs like that as well. So students in schools will also be exposed to data science, to AI, and will be more ready when they go to universities to know if they want that, or to a little bit influence them to go to those directions.
Okay, so the advice is to just start from the high school.
as soon as you can. Kindergarten, maybe.
Okay. We have here Dr. Wolfgang Feist from Germany. Wolfgang is very much involved in a startup area in Germany, which is also very hot area, and a lot of things are happening there in startup area. What's your observations from German market of this government involvement? What is working? What's not? What do you think? What really makes things rolling in AI development?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for being here, and I can share some of the perspectives that have already been mentioned. So in Germany, I think traditionally the education in AI and computer science is quite good. Also with the publications, I think research also is good, and the government is very much investing now in additional professors education to strengthen that area. And there's also, maybe you heard of the Fraunhofer Gesellschaft, which is an association that is bridging the gap between academia and the practical application of the research with the companies. And that is a main vehicle to bring AI very much to the companies that with alone cannot adopt AI in that way. So you know that the large German companies, they have their own AI competence centers, and they heavily invest also in AI because they understood that this is the future, like the car manufacturers with autonomous driving and think that and Bosch and Siemens, you know, they are very much involved. I worked for SAP, and for SAP it was a given to embrace AI for enterprise software. So that's very clear, and the government is very much fostering with the Fraunhofer Association to now bring the AI topic into the mid-sized enterprises. And that is clearly good. And the main areas in Germany to foster AI is mobility. Because of the automotive heritage, it's a lot in healthcare, because that's a growth topic, but from a company perspective, but it helps also the society. And of course, Industry 4.0, where we have also another industrial strength that we want to further strengthen. And startups clearly play an important role in that, to work together with mid-sized enterprises and large enterprises. And the government has improved the way the capabilities and encouraged so that more funding is now available, better in the seed phase, weaker still in the growth phase. But there are still some deficits that I would see. So number one is clearly that And you can imagine that also from your own experience, that sometimes Germany tends to over-regulate and over-engineer things. And that also happens because we suffer from the burden of too much data privacy. I think it's all recognized that this makes a lot of sense, but sometimes you can take it to a level where this plays back against you and is only then a benefit for those who do not care about that so much. Like, because also German companies are in the international competition, and that's sometimes forgotten by some politicians that just see their microcosmos. And we're competing against the US players and the Chinese players, and sometimes the regulation is, or we feel this regulation is only put on the companies from Germany or from Europe, and the other ones find ways to work around that. And there are also some other topics like antitrust laws, where some collaborations that are completely meaningful are challenged by the government. So one example is that for car sharing, Mercedes and BMW wanted to bring their 2 car sharing units together, and that was very much challenged by the government. While I mean, you know, all the big tech, they are not that challenged, or they start to get challenged. And of course, the car sharing is not something where these car manufacturers have a dominant position. Not at all. They fight against Uber and the other US players. And so sometimes our own government need to learn about what the digital economy means and what are the rules of the game and adopt to that. And also one challenge is, of course, the public administration itself, which is, I would say, very, very poorly digitized, so that it takes quite long to, for example, get a company started. So it takes weeks until the company is actually in the formal book, and all the process is paper-based. It's not electronic. And when I once visited Estonia, and that's maybe one of the examples that is always quoted also in Germany, they told me we can start and have the company found in 1 hour. So I think and the benchmark should be paperless and more rapid and without all the bureaucracy, because for good reasons there are also labor laws and stuff like that, but sometimes they don't reflect the digital economy, where you have freelancers from everywhere and you pay them well because you need to have them work for you, but you still get treated under the same regulation that is applied for poorly paid people in the agriculture or in the service sector, and therefore it's not only the money, but it's all this regulation and bureaucracy which is a challenge. I mean, you can overcome that, but the growth of startups would be much better if also this would take into consideration. And I mean, now it's getting on the public discussion, where the representatives from the startup initiatives and the politicians that take care a lot about digital now bring that to the table to say we need to be more competitive, we need to be more agile, we need to provide a better environment. And it's not only the money, because ultimately there is enough money. It's only a matter of allocating them in the right way, but it's also to have the right environment so that the entrepreneurs have fun to and have the possibility to grow their business there and not go to US or somewhere else. And I think that's what we from the German AI initiative, and I'm part of that, what we are always telling the government, that it's of course about funding, but it's also about the frame conditions that need to be improved. And we have a long list of things that need to be improved to make sure that we are successful. And one element is also that because, okay, you can say from Germany is big, but we will think Germany is still small, competing with US and China. And we believe very much in the cooperation on a European level, because only on a European level we can compete with these titans from the other continents. And that's why we believe that this is also a key element of the story, and that includes also the startup space, where you go quickly international in order to grow your business, because software business is international by definition. It has a local market, of course, but it needs to scale, and it has the possibility to scale because you can work digital and remote.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Wolfgang, for sharing this. I see obvious two takeaways from that what you have said. So one is to necessity to build such centers or institutions that really allows to cooperate better between academias and then business and maybe also startups. So try to break the barriers and make this cooperation better. And another one, but that's obviously not only Germany but Europe as a whole, is not to over-regulate the market because it really puts Europe in an uncompetitive position. And it really makes life difficult for startups and for everyone. But of course, it's maybe really different big subject for another discussion. But it's important factor when we are talking about the government support and dealing with that. So people responsible for creating regulations should be also aware of the effect on this innovation startup area. And there are certain doubts that really this interest has not been considered properly working on particular regulations so far in Europe. So maybe too much of a perspective of lawyers. This legal side was too much taken in account and too less the business itself. But of course it's quite different subject here. And we also have Professor Philip Treleaven from UK. Professor Treleaven has broader experience from other continents and other countries. Professor, would you like to share your perspective on that? What first?
Yes.
How's it now in UK, and how is your observations from other geographies, and how you compare Europe to?
I should start with an apology. My Wi-Fi isn't very good, so if it breaks up, everybody, do something like this, and I'll turn the camera on. I particularly liked the second slide that was put up. These are some sort of oddball reactions. Firstly, I think the big data is likely to be bigger than AI. And therefore I base this on all the work that we do in the big finance companies. And that. Secondly, I think I understood your comment about only 32 companies had really come out of academia of any interest. One of the problems, and the one that I really liked, was the fact that the government didn't have a plan. I thought that was excellent. The reason I say this is that the government has a role in creating ecosystems, but we have a tendency in Europe to do what's called analysis paralysis. So rather than implementing things, we do all the planning. And I certainly think one of the problems we have in the UK is that a lot of the government people have had a liberal arts education. They don't know any science and technology. And therefore they've been trained to, you know, they're super bright people, but they've been trained to actually do some research and write a report. And I was the advisor actually to the European Commission in the 80s when they set up the industry program. And I've done a lot of advisory work for Asian countries. So if you went to see the head of MITI in Japan, the Ministry of International Trade and Industry, he's probably got a PhD in electronics from MIT. You know, this would be something that you know, wouldn't happen in the UK and that. Just as some examples, 25 years ago, we developed a lot of the early financial fraud detection systems and built the first insider dealing detection system for London Stock Exchange. And then the students who did that sold a company for 150 million. We developed the first algorithmic trading platform in Europe with one of the banks. We've just built quite a big, possibly a first algorithmic trading platform for insurance. And we've done a lot of automated work in financial regulation. Every bit of that was industry funded. The reason is that certainly in the UK, academics get promoted, as I think in many countries, by scholarship, not by doing startups and impactful research. And therefore you've got this, is it a dichotomy, the right word? All the students want to do impactful research and start companies. And they are looking to do applied research and work with outside organizations. And a lot of the academics are actually hostile to it. So when you apply for funding from a traditional research council, and research council in the UK is, you know, for AI, and that's got billions to spend, they tend to be funding academic research rather than industrial impact. And for this reason, if you want to actually innovate, and I think Israel's a good example of this, you just get on with it and you find companies that are interested in, you know, traveling with you. I mean, the sort of thing that actually does make a difference is two of my PhD students sold an AI company to a big American organization for $26 million. This is the sort of thing that actually stimulates the ecosystem. So and when we spun out DeepMind to Google for 500 million, these are sorts of things that actually change the ecosystem. So I'm sorry to just jump around a lot, but my feeling is that if we want to proceed, and I think it's been echoed by other speakers, in Europe, we just need to get on with it, do experimentation and just spin out companies to do it. Don't wait for the government to, you know, give you money or try and do some sort of plan. Otherwise, you know, China, America, Asia, etc., you know, will be, you know, delivering the systems before we finish the plan. And in many, so what I tend to do now is that we've got a huge student population, 300 PhDs, 650 masters, 500 undergraduates. We just give them impactful research and encourage them to start companies. And they engage with outside organizations. They're really fired up to do this. And they've been pretty successful. So it's a good educational benefit, but in many ways, it's achieved by actually just working in a parallel universe to the government funding, which isn't really having, I don't think, much impact. So I hope there were some interesting things in what I said, but as I said, and this is, I think, reflected by the other speakers, the problem in Europe is that we tend to over-regulate, over-plan, etc., while, you know, most of the other countries are actually doing experimentation, building systems, and launching spin-outs. So I'll pause there. Actually, I think I've had a rant. I think it's called a rant, isn't it? I've said enough.
Okay, thank you, Professor. So, well, my question is if well, despite all the efforts and strategies and so on, do we really have a chance to catch up with this states and China that's probably the superpowers in AI as well? So we still have a chance to catch up. Yeah.
I think definitely yes. I think the imperative is if we don't catch up, Europe's going to have a pretty terrible future. I used to be the vice president international for the university, so I used to go to Asia every 3 months. It was a wonderful job. I greatly enjoyed it. I don't think the university got much out of it, but I really loved it. And probably I shouldn't say this on YouTube, should I? The interesting thing is that, you know, in lots of countries like Thailand, people struggle, you know, in also places like Hong Kong, you know, the lowest echelon. And the problem is that we've seen China and Korea and some of these other countries grow at 8% a year, you know, year on year. We need to get our act together in Europe, otherwise we could decline, you know, in the same rate. So I must say that at the moment, it's probably the most innovative time I can ever remember. And all of us who work in AI and big data are really fortunate to have all this exciting things to work on. But we need to actually, you know, make it happen, because if we don't, the rest of the population are going to be, you know, in a bad way. You know, so as I said, it's a super interesting time. We're starting to produce startups from my department, you know, I would jokingly say on an industrial scale, just by turning the students loose. And it's important for Europe that we are actually successful.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's keep thinking across here. Okay, I think it's a good time to go to the phase to the conclusions. So if I would like to ask you to comment on what was being said or commented already, and we just go for an round for maybe definitely shorter round. So Piotr, you are the first here. What do you think about that? What was being said, and what your conclusion for the discussion?
So my conclusion is that don't overregulate, especially since this year there's gonna be AI regulation, and just in 30th of June, as a foundation, we are doing a European AI Forum together with you know, AI's Austria, HUB AI, etc. So I think the regulation is crucial. And now we are joking, I would say, you know, just to referring to what Mr. Philip said. We are joking now, let's make this bug a feature. So it's gonna be like with GDPR, right? So that maybe maybe Europe could build on top of that, on top of the trustworthy AI, a feature that will be needed by many societies, like we did with GDPR, which is somehow it happened to be a role model by some countries, and it was adopted by Brazil and many other countries all around the world. So I think the regulation is crucial, but I hope that government will not over-regulate the sector. And in terms of support, I believe there is a need for funding local specialties, I would say, or local expertise. Like it was mentioned by Yael from Israel that there wasn't any support for local language, you know, which we use in Israel. Then I think we should support Polish language, for example, because if not, then it will be just Google, and we end up with Google. So I think, for example, what we should support is just the local flavors. We should, you know, let market loose. I mean, like free markets works, but nevertheless, we should support some local expertise. Like I said, like robotics in agriculture, but collecting apples, or Polish language. That's how I see the support of the government.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Professor Nalepa, what's your final comments here?
Yeah, well, I would fully agree with Piotr that we should not over-regulate. I think the state should be some kind of active actors that participate the process of developing AI, but the state should not really act as a reviewer or a blocker of what companies are doing together with researchers. This is one thing. The second thing is I don't really believe that just playing a simple catching up game will bring us anywhere. I think it's not really about catching up with the US or in China, because in terms of numbers, this is kind of difficult. On the other hand, I think we should think in Europe how we can coordinate research in such a way that on the European level we can address a number of areas where we can really get some results which are competitive. And another thing is that recently the whole topic about ethical AI, trustworthy AI has been quite important, also as Piotr mentioned. And while personally I'm also interested in this as a researcher and a practitioner, on the other hand, I'm sometimes a little bit worried by overemphasizing this topic in Europe, because some of my fellow researchers say that, okay, our colleagues in states, they do AI research, and we just somehow are positioned by the governments to do the ethical reasoning about their research, which is not exactly, I think, what it should be done. So while I fully sympathize with trustworthy AI, I think we should be careful not to put the European perspective on AI as only based on ethical trustworthy AI, and we should basically look for some opportunities to compete on the European level, but not really catching up with the big players, because I think this is not the way to win.
Okay, great observation. We have to find our European way, right? For this. Yeah, Rosenberg.
Yeah.
Your comment.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you. It was very interesting and encouraging to see that some of our challenges are common challenges. So it's always good to know that we are in a good boat together. Israel is unfortunately not part of Europe. So we on our own are a very small country. We definitely need to join forces with Europe and whatever we can, and with the US and whatever we can to enable our growth. But definitely we can't reach those scales. So Israel as always needs to choose its battles and needs to look for the places that we have our advantage in. I think something interesting that I can share. The last two final comments that were discussed were about regulation. So a nice anecdote about how making a regulation a feature. So we just the Israel Innovation Authority, which I work for, we just helped creating a new consortium that its purpose is to focus on explainable AI, which will enable regulators to use this software capabilities to enable explainable and fairness in AI. So that's how we use a bug and create a feature out of it. So hopefully this platform will enable and fulfill the needs of the regulators and be a feature by itself.
Okay, thank you very much. Wolfgang Weist, what your comment?
Yeah, so I think some areas of AI and domains are, I would say, decided who is the winner, but there's always new territory where the winner is not yet decided. And I think while AI very much was applied in the consumer space and digitization started there, I think now more and more of the enterprise and B2B topics come into the focus, also in combination with the physical world. You call it Internet of Things. And I think in that space, in the combination also with the physical world, there are so many domains, be it the industrial space, be it agriculture, be it further topics, also the healthcare topic. I think there are so many domains and verticals that were now explored. Sports tech I saw as a very, very important space coming up, and all these markets where the winner is not yet decided because they are emerging. I think there's a good chance if we focus on the right topics, bring the right parties together, and be entrepreneurial to win these spaces. And it's because you need not only the AI knowledge, you need also the domain knowledge. And domain knowledge decides whether you can really create the best AI algorithm for that problem. And it's not only the AI ground capability, but it's the application. And I mean, the US and China often look for scalability and more for, let's say, less or medium complex topics. But when you deal with enterprises, it really gets very complicated. And I believe there are spaces where if we do it right, where we have a good chance to win, or where some companies win. Like, for example, we have a startup in Germany that is observing in the railway when you have where the rail guards that shift back and forth, that do the surveillance, like it's called CONUX, and they now observe and monitor the whole railway ways in order to keep the maintenance level high. And I think that needs a combination of sensor technology, AI, but also domain knowledge to understand what is really a problem and what is just an outlier. And I think there are many of that spaces where you need domain knowledge, and there the domain knowledge from our companies combined with the knowledge from research comes together to build new companies. And the government should help to foster to grow these companies and help the entrepreneurs to be successful, and large corporations and mid-sized corporations to partner with them in order to leapfrog and early on benefit from the innovations. And then it's a mutual benefit for everybody.
Thank you very much for this for this comment. I think it's very important, this domain expertise and domain knowledge here. So AI is not for AI, but to help us to make things better, cheaper, faster, and so on. But it's still are industries which are quite traditional places, and when you extend that justice, it's much easier to deploy AI here. Professor Treleven, you have the privilege to be
yes,
concluding voice.
I'd like to echo about we need more talent. That's, everybody I think would agree about this, and I'd also like to carry on from where Wolfgang said about matching up research, particularly in universities, with the domain expertise, in companies. And this is what makes obviously successful startups. So anything the government can do, particularly to change the culture in universities, to encourage them to work closer, to do more impactful research, to create spin-outs and things like that. I think this would be something that I would suggest.
Okay, so thank you very much, all of you panelists, Piotr, Grzegorz, Philip, Joel, and Wolfgang for sharing this thoughts and ideas. That was very dense hour of exchanging ideas and finding new things that we can trying to promote as a good practices or good examples here. We are finishing almost exactly at planned time. So thank you all those who are watching us on LinkedIn or on Facebook. We have been streaming this material. We will also make it available later on online for watching. And of course, we will continue our conference tomorrow with a workshop by Operator Chmury Krajowe about low code AI in a cloud. So all the participants of the conference are invited here. And well, let's hope that we will be good promoters of AI, that our government would be clever and would be doing right things with public funds to support AI with the most optimal effect. And well, I hope that we will see good examples of what we are doing here in Europe or in close countries like Israel with AI, and really be not catching up, but finding our own way for AI development. So thank you very much, and have a nice evening. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Good
Thank you.
evening.
Goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.